I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, How to Handle Microaggressions in the Workplace. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing Communications for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Open Learning and Career Development. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. And I would also like to acknowledge the histories, contributions, and legacies of the African Nova Scotian people and communities who have been here for over 400 years. And I am delighted to briefly introduce our two speakers for today's webinar and our hosts. Firstly, I'll begin with Camille Dundas. Camille is the editor-in-chief of Canada's largest Black online magazine, byblacks.com. She's led her team to win 3 National Ethnic Media Awards and a commendation from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Camille was also named among the top 100 Black Canadian women, accomplished women by CIBWE, in 2022. Her relentless passion for Black history and dedication to justice has fueled Camille's second career as a racial equity educator, helping some of the largest organizations in the world, such as Google and KPMG International, understand how to effectively and actively build anti-racist workplaces. Camille's approach to education is anchored in a historical understanding of systemic racism and how that has impacted today's corporate culture. And her delivery is deeply rooted in her own lived experience as a Black woman in the workplace. Welcome, Camille. And now I'd like to introduce Sean Morissette. Sean has been gifting audiences as an artist, educator, and motivational speaker for more than 2 decades. He's received more than 20 awards, including the 2012 Medal of Appreciation from the United Nations Association of Canada for his work with youth in high-risk communities. After spending years as a motivational speaker and youth social service worker in the education sector, Sean branched out and began delivering his presentations to corporations. A combination of his various talks and personal experiences, these talks focus on how to address anti-Black racism in the workplace while offering collaborative solutions on how to dismantle racial bias. Thanks so much for joining us, for hosting today's session, and we'll be together for the next hour or so. I would encourage you, for those who are just joining us, if you would like to have your questions so that everyone can see them in the chat, I would encourage you to open up the chat box and make sure that it's indicated that everyone can see your questions and comments. We'll have a lot of dialogue in today's session, and we will leave time at the end for questions. And if you would prefer to unmute yourself and speak freely, then I can certainly unmute you. We have a large group with us, so we'll make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. So without further ado, Camille and Sean, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mary Eleanor.
Thank you.
We're happy to be here. I love this large group, so thanks for being with us. You still want to make it as interactive as possible, so definitely use the hand raise tool or put your question in the chat, and we'll make sure we are leaving lots of time at the end. So we're going to kick it off with a video with some comedy, right, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay, set it up for us.
Yes, we're going to dive right in. So something very close to my heart. I've dealt with this my entire life. I won't go through it all, but it's this question of, where are you really from? Mm-hmm. Right? Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Many times.
So like, where are you from? You say, I'm from Canada. No, like, where are you really from? I mean, where are you really from?
Right.
So we're going to take a really quick look at this video and then we'll discuss.
All right.
Cool? All right, here we go.
Oh, I don't know that we can hear the audio.
Oh, okay. Can you hear now? Let's try that again. Okay, me too.
Maybe let's start again. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware, Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
You may have seen it before.
Okay.
But, I always say regular American is my favorite phrase
Yep.
coming off of that.
Whoops. And these are the outtakes. So we're going to pause that.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Continue.
But they're worth watching. So I love how humor can help us have conversations about difficult topics, and people are like, what's the big deal, right? Like,
Right.
why is this offensive? And I don't want people to walk away today thinking that it's never okay to talk about ethnicity or talk about people's backgrounds. It's not that it's never okay to ask someone where are they from, but context is everything. So let's say you're at work, you have a new employee who comes in and they sit at the desk, and that's the first question you ask them.
Mm-hmm.
That can be offensive and really off-putting, because for racialized people, very often that question can make them uncomfortable, because they're thinking, what are you going to do with that information? In the sense, how are you going to judge me differently if you know I wasn't born here, if you know I'm an immigrant, if you know I came here as a refugee, if you know I'm not from where you're from? It's also a sense is steeped in bias, because sometimes we have a very specific idea or image of who gets to be Canadian.
Right.
And if you don't fit that ideal, then you must not be Canadian. So what you're saying to that person essentially is, you do not fit what I think, the image that I hold as Canadian, therefore you cannot just be Canadian. There are many people, Sean, maybe you have some friends too. I have a couple of friends, Black friends, who can trace their ancestry in Canada hundreds of years, right? Especially in Nova Scotia.
Absolutely. Which is where my wife is from. Shout out to all the people from Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
North Preston in the house. I grew up, I still have a bit of an identity crisis, right? I grew up with people saying, so where are you from? And I'm from Canada. Where are your parents really from? Trinidad, Grenada. And then, I tried to latch onto my Caribbean roots, and then I went to the Caribbean, and then guess what happened? I realized
like,
they didn't view me as Caribbean at all, right? So I still had this issue. More recently, about a year ago, I was in a cigar shop. And I naturally assumed that the gentleman who owned the shop was Cuban. He sounded Cuban. He kind of had that Cuban look. I love Cuba, by the way. And I'm like, where are you from? And then he's like, I'm Palestinian, right? And then his guard went up, and then it got tense. And then I had to kind of work real hard to win him back, so to speak, to let him know I didn't mean anything offensive by it. But it just goes to show that sometimes, we can assume and our intention is good, but it can be perceived in a completely different way. Now he's looking at it like, so what, because I'm Palestinian, you don't want to buy my cigar? Meanwhile, it's like, no, like nothing but love. So anyway, so
that's a great example though, because for a lot of for several people from different countries, where they're from can be highly politicized.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Think about this guy from Palestine. Now he might be thinking all kinds of things like, well, what does this guy believe? What's his stance on Israel versus Palestine? How am I going to be judged? Like, can I trust him? Am I safe?
Exactly.
Right? So think about that in a workplace setting. right?
Yes,
If that was in a
yes.
workplace setting,
Yes.
and someone grilling you on where you're from, and then you finding out that they have views that are contrary to your psychological safety.
That's right. So I think at the end of the day, it can definitely be viewed as a microaggression, hands down. So speaking of microaggression, some of us don't know what that is. So can you talk to us a bit about
Yes.
what a microaggression is?
What exactly is a microaggression? Well, first I have to say that the micro in microaggression is a huge misnomer. I think that it allows us to really minimize the impact of these acts of exclusion, is what they really are. Allows us to kind of absolve ourselves from responsibility. While our intentions may be good, this type of harm is our intentions are really irrelevant. And it's about the impact and understanding the impact of our words and actions on people. Microaggressions are defined as subtle, stunning, often nonverbal exchanges that are put downs of people who have been historically excluded, right? And all kinds of groups can experience microaggressions. Of course, racialized people, women, people from queer communities, disabled communities, and all parts of identities, right? So the thing is, though, these microaggressions, they don't exist on their own. They're kind of like paper cuts. If you get one paper cut today, you'll be okay. But Sean, if you got a paper cut every day over the rest of your career, that is some serious damage, right? So I want you to think about, there's lots of even data that shows us that microaggressions are linked to low self-esteem, increased stress levels, anxiety, depression. It has a real impact on the way people show up in the workplace.
Yes. Absolutely. And I like that analogy of just 1,000 small nicks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like at first it doesn't do anything but compound it over time, or sometimes it does. Like and I will share an example. Actually. I have an example coming up of how it didn't take much to kind of set me off a little bit. So we'll dive into the next slide here.
Yeah.
All right. So we're talking about emotional tax now.
Yeah. Emotional tax is one of the huge ways that microaggressions impact people. There's lots of studies around this, and it's the combination of feeling different from your peers at work because of your identity, and the associated effects on your health and well-being. I mean, think about when I researched this, there's a physiological connection between when you experience this and what happens to your body. There's an increased level of cortisol release in your body. Your cognitive processes are disrupted, which, as you can imagine, can have an impact on your work output. People who are not categorized as marginalized, they kind of come to work and do their work, and that's cool. Right. But people who are racialized or marginalized, there are a whole host of micro decisions and micro expectations that we're having when we come into the workplace, which is a huge distraction from us just doing our actual work.
Absolutely. And you talk about the physiological effects, like you don't understand. It's like we can have a hard time sleeping, for example. We don't know why, right? I went through that recently and I didn't know why. And then you kind of, once you're able to frame it and understand where some of this anxiety is coming from. I mean, I can share an example.
Yeah.
Right. So I worked as an entrepreneur for several years, 17 years to be exact. And then decided, okay, it's time to get the full-time job. I'm in the office environment. I'm new to this office world, office culture. And about 3 or 4 months into working, I didn't realize that. Okay, so if they said, okay, if you do this donation, right, this donation towards a specific organization, you can get a free lunch. I did this donation. I went up to my office and I saw all these people eating food. All right. And I said, well, what's all the food for? They said, well, if you made the donation, then, you can have access to this free lunch. And I said, okay, cool. So I grabbed a plate and I started putting food on my plate. Less than 2 minutes after putting food on my plate, one of my white colleagues, I should say, calls out to me from right across the room and says, hey, Sean, this food is only for people who made the donation, right? And I'm like, yes, Emma, I know that. Yes, thank you, right? This is across the room in front of everybody, all right? So, okay, no problem. Continue putting food. Less than 2 minutes later, somebody else, their head pops up from the kitchen, and it's my other colleague named Lindsay. And Lindsay says, hey, Sean, this is only for people who did the donation. So now I'm starting to feel like
some type of way.
Something's off here. Why are you singling me out? There's other people coming into the floor, And so it was embarrassing, but I didn't understand what I was feeling at the time. So I went home and spoke to a mentor of mine. He broke it down. He said, listen, some people thought that you may have been stealing food. Some people thought that, you were just helping yourself. You could care less. And what's worse, some people may have thought that perhaps you couldn't even afford the meal. And so they took pity on you. You know what I mean? And so I would say that this greatly impacted me, even to this day. This last one, we talk about risks and the well-being and productivity. So in terms of productivity, it did affect my ability to kind of work with my colleagues after that for a time. Eventually it kind of, it was okay.
Yeah.
But the well-being aspect of it, really, to this day, when somebody says, "Hey, Sean, help yourself to some food," it's like, I feel,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? It's
and
like,
this on guard part too, because I bet now you're gonna be like, "Hey, I did the donation,"
Yeah.
like making sure to and this reminds me of a story of a white colleague of mine who was telling me she was at a work function and a new Black woman had been hired, and so she was speaking to her, just introducing, and it was like a family event, and so she had brought her 3 kids there, and she said, "Oh yeah, these are my 3 sons, all from the same father."
oh,
And my friend said to me, she felt so bad that this Black woman
had to,
felt the need
Yeah.
because for so long she's been stereotyped
Yes,
as like a
yes.
single Black mother with baby daddies, right? And she feels the need to come out and say, "Hey, all my kids have the same dad."
Yeah.
Like, that's
yeah,
sad.
it is sad, and so these are those things that can be compounded that we don't often think about or discuss. And the last thing about that being different piece about there's I did feel different, as there's not plenty of my colleagues are people of color, but there's also this piece. I came from kind of like the hip hop community, so the way I spoke and my swag was a little bit different, but that was also my key to relating to many of the youth that I served in these high risk communities. So my asset was sort of also frowned upon. So there was this thing where I felt different. I was on guard, hypersensitivity to some of these things, but yes, you know what I mean. So these are some of the issues that we face. So Camille, so what are some of the different categories of microaggressions, if you could take us through some of that?
Yeah, there are a couple through research. Pathologizing differences, also called micro insults. These are attempts, either conscious or unconscious, to criticize a group's cultural styles, values, or practices, right? So in one study that I read, white people assumed that Black people in a workplace were delivering goods and sent them through the service door of an office building. This happened to the editor-in-chief of Vogue UK, Edward Enninful, I believe his name is. Wow. And he was dressed in a suit, walked through the front doors, and the security was like, "Oh, you should just enter through the back." Like, just assumed he was there, right? Another woman I know got all dressed up for her job interview, did her hair. She went in and sat there and said, "Hey, I'm here for the interview." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, just sit here." 20 minutes went by, and she's like, "Oh, are they running late? Like, what's happening?" And she's like, "Oh, the housekeeping manager is just tied up right now." She's like, "I did not apply for that role." The second is
I don't mean to laugh, by the way.
I know, it's just like
oh,
right, denigrating and pigeonholing. That's when white people will use their power to undermine, confine, or exaggerate a person's mental capacity, behavior, or appearance, right? So like, oh, you must be so good at basketball, Sean, or you're Asian, oh, you must be so good at math, that type of thing. Excluding, rendering invisible. That happens when people send the message, "You don't belong," or also, "I don't see you, so I don't see color." Very, very well-intentioned often, but what we're really doing is avoiding our own discomforts about talking about race by telling people we don't see color. And that's also just went over it, the colorblind attitudes, right?
And that can have an adverse effect too. You think, I mean, they don't mean, their intention is it's well intentioned to say, "Well, I don't see color."
Yeah.
But when you say that, in fact, what you're doing is you're sort of dismissing that person's experiences, their history. You're saying that, I'm not showing an inability to try to relate or understand or empathize to what that person may have been going through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's continue on. Let's look at some of the common microaggressions.
Yeah. And as we read these out, I want you to reflect on whether you've heard any of these, whether they were said to you, or maybe you were the one saying them. So write yes in the chat if you've heard these or if you've experienced them.
All right. So I'll start off. And we'll be honest, there's one in here that I'm guilty of.
Okay.
All right. So first off, you're so exotic.
What sport did you play to get into this school?
You aren't like other insert race people.
I get that a lot. You aren't like other Black people. Is that your real hair? Can I touch it?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that one. I know, but it wasn't towards a black woman. It was a South Asian worker I was working with, and she had her hair one day. And it was so beautiful.
Wrong.
I know, but it was so beautiful, man. Anyway, I apologize, and I know what's wrong. I'm just being honest and saying that I'm guilty. Okay, are you a diversity hire?
Are you the new cleaner?
Do all your kids have the same father?
You have really big eyes for an Asian person.
All right. So that's under the racialized section.
Yeah, and there's a lot more. And I'm seeing lots of yeses. Yes, oh my God, my hair. Yes, I have big eyes. Insert eye roll. Yes. So Kim is saying in Nova Scotia, the one for women, this is very, very common. So, and I will give a caveat here for this one, Sean, because depending on your relationship with someone, it might be okay. Like, we're close friends. If you call me dear or love or hey, look, come up, whatever. Okay, you've never called me that, but it's just not your style. But I'm saying we have a close relationship. I wouldn't feel any ways about that. Right. But if I'm in a meeting and if I'm giving like an idea and my boss says to me, "Oh, that won't work here, love." It's a different context, right? Because he's kind of like taking me down a notch, right? By using a word that is not in itself offensive, but in the way that it's used, it's taking me down a notch, context. Right?
I once lived in a building and there's this guy named Edmund and he still referred to women as broads and dames.
Okay. All right, Edmund.
And it was really, really weird. But talking to him made me feel like I was in the 1930s. Oh my God. Right? It was,
I bet.
But he's such a nice guy. But he just broads and dames. Anyway,
yes.
I apologize.
Okay.
So anyway, do you really need to work?
Yeah. When I came across that, I found that surprising that people still say something like that. That just seemed like so 1940s to me.
Very much so.
It's just so strange. People from queer communities also facing microaggressions.
Absolutely. That's so gay.
Still surprised how often I still hear this.
Yes.
Because that's like when we were kids.
Yes,
that was okay to say. No one reprimanded you if you said that. So I'm still surprised that let's not age ourselves, but 20, 30 years later, people still think this is okay. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's not cool.
Who's the man and who's the woman in your relationship?
Oh, man. Ugh. Is your wife coming?
Assuming that you have a wife,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So you should just say spouse, because you don't know. Unless you actually know. And I want to give another caveat here. Yes. Sometimes when I go through these, people will be like, well, the family is under attack. Husband and wife are under attack. These words in and of themselves are not under attack. If you know that the person is married to a woman, then of course refer to them as your wife, right? I'm married to Roger, so you'd say, your husband, right? Yes. But in an office setting, very often you're working under assumptions. Right. So you cannot assume that someone is married to the opposite sex.
This next one made me cringe.
I know, but people say these things in polite conversation. Again, very surprising. I've been in scenarios where I've heard these things. When are you going to have the surgery?
Yeah.
Like, number one, that is so personal.
There was a time where I wouldn't have believed that somebody would actually ask that in this day and age.
I know.
But it's sometimes the things that people ask.
I know.
It's unbelievable.
People with disabilities.
Yes. But you look so normal.
Right. Like, I would never think that you're disabled.
This touches so close to me because, we have our son, he's 8. He does have high-functioning autism, right? And we hear that all the time, but he looks so normal. Yeah, well, what do you...
He is normal.
Yeah. I mean, but like, does he supposed to look a certain way?
Yeah.
But it also speaks to people not understanding.
Yeah.
We use the word some use the word disability. We like to use special abilities.
Yeah.
That's what we use it with our son.
Absolutely.
But I get it.
Yeah. And very often they think that they're saying something nice to you, like they're trying to be like helpful.
Yes. But he looks so normal. Yeah. We know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Very good point, Camille.
Yeah. So saying things like, I'm really OCD about my files today. Like, I'm so OCD. This is super common. And people need to understand that you really are minimizing the impact of people who actually do have these conditions and the difficulties they go through by just making light of it. Same thing with the other one.
Yeah, I'm so dyslexic today.
Yeah.
And I had a coworker who used to always, when she'd get flustered or whatever, she said, that's my autism kicking in.
But she wasn't autistic.
No.
Yeah. Exactly.
See, so once again, like where it's coming from, you know what I mean? But once again, what's cool about this type of training is we're now giving people the tools. Because if I had the tools back then, I probably would have corrected her and said, I know what you're trying to say, but you know what I mean? It can be viewed as offensive to some people. You know what I'm saying? So,
exactly.
Got it. Okay. So we're going to look at some other Actually, no, we're gonna jump into this one here, right? What's in a name? I apologize. I looked at the old slide. So this one touches close to my heart. Okay, actually, what's in a name? I actually felt so passionate about this. Wrote a children's book about it called "A Name Just for You." Okay, it's beautiful. And when we
Available
decided,
now on Amazon.
available on Amazon. Yes, I'll leave the link. Shameless plug. And so when we decided to give our firstborn, his name, we fell in love with the name Andwele. Andwele. It sounds so beautiful, Andwele, which is Swahili for God brought me. You know what I mean? And we just fell in love with it. My mother had so much trepidation. My mother, from Trinidad, she said, "Oh God, no, Sean, they're gonna call him Welly and Willie." And then she went through all this stuff and just started putting all. Meanwhile, we just had this beautiful name. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, listen, we in my lifetime, I've seen a president with the name Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, so anything is possible. You know what I'm saying? So having said that, we recognize that people also experience a lot of microaggressions around their names. So Camille, can you tell us more?
If you work with someone who doesn't use their full name at work, it is probably not by chance or by coincidence. They very likely shortened or anglicized their name so they don't have to go through the humiliation of you mispronouncing their name, laughing at their name, or worse, dismissing their resume because it sounds foreign. There are countless studies showing that anglicized names on job applications have a much higher chance of getting callbacks for interviews. So I wanted to show you this short clip from Hollywood actress Uzomaka Duba. You may remember her. I first saw her in the hit Netflix series Orange is the New Black, where she talks about her name and its origin.
All right, so I'm gonna play this, and now we're gonna get the volume right. So yes. I'm gonna mute our mics.
But text us if it's not working.
Yes, let us know. We're doing all this on the fly. Here we go.
My family named me Uzomaka. That's my full name. It means the road is good. Isn't that a beautiful name? Thanks, Mom. I got it for my birthday. Uzomaka. But I grew up in a small New England town, and there weren't a lot of Nigerian Americans living in my region. And I would have teachers or anyone, neighbors, try and say my name, and it would be Azumeka, Uzomaka, Uzokuza, any version that they could think of other than Uzomaka. So I came home from school one day, and my mom was cooking in the kitchen, as she is wont to do, the mother of 5 children. And I said to her, "Mommy, can I ask you a question?" She said, I said, "Can you call me Zoe?" And she stopped and gave that mother look that only mothers know and have, and said, "Why?" And I said, "Because no one can say Uzomaka." And she looked at me and she said, "If they can learn to say Tchaikovsky and Michelangelo and Dostoevsky, then they can learn to say Uzomaka." And I never asked her again. And what is amazing now, standing in my womanhood, in my power, is I wouldn't change my name for a second. I'm so proud of that name and what stems behind it and what it represents. So do not ever erase those identifiers that are held in you, whether it's your gap, whether it's your name, whether it's your food. It is yours, and it was given to you at birth, and it is yours to own.
Giving the snapping clap
All
here.
right.
I love that clip.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. And I love what she said. Tchaikovsky, right?
Yeah.
I love that she pointed out some of these things that we see on a regular, and we never stop to really think about it. So my question,
it really points to us as a society, because we have elevated some identities over others.
Yes,
and that's an uncomfortable truth that we have to admit if we're going to move further.
Absolutely. So my question for you, Camille, has anybody tried to abbreviate your name at any point?
Sure.
Let me call you Cam.
Yeah.
Are you okay with Cam?
Yeah, my friends and family call me Cam.
What about Meal?
My mother calls me that.
Your mother calls you Meal?
Yes. I don't know why.
Meal.
I don't know why. It doesn't bother me.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that my mom picked out of a French name book. It doesn't have a particularly deep, you know, but there are a lot of names that have very special deep meanings.
Yes.
And when we don't take the time to learn how to pronounce those names, we're really dishonoring and disrespecting a huge part of that person's identity.
Absolutely. And I find that you know, when you ask people how to pronounce their name, a lot of times they're flattered by it. Maybe flattered is the wrong word.
They're absolutely open.
And they're so appreciative is the word I'm trying to find. That you took the time to ask them how do you pronounce the name. It's like an ultimate sign of appreciation, respect, and trying to learn what is ultimately a large piece of their identity.
And we have some tips on the next slide, Sean.
We do.
For people to think about when you're engaging with someone whose name that you find hard to pronounce.
Yes.
So some do's and don'ts. Don't say, I'm never going to remember that.
Okay.
That is really disrespectful, and you're being dismissive and showing that you don't value that person's identity. Or do you have something shorter for that? Can I just call you something else instead? Again, a person's name is part of their history and identity, and you refuse that when you don't try to learn their name, or worse yet, rename them. I've been in an office setting where, the supervisor has completely renamed somebody, like not even shortened. They just find like, oh, that's too hard to pronounce. We're going to call you Susie.
Yeah.
I mean, so disrespectful. Yeah. So instead, repeat their name after they've introduced themselves. Let them know you really want to ensure you're saying it right. Ask them for patience. I like to write things down phonetically.
Same.
So that could be just my, journalism background, where I had to write things out for the host phonetically. And then I practice saying their name whenever I'm engaging them. It also helps me to remember their name because I'm horrible at remembering them. So I'll say their name. I'll be like, okay, Sean, that's great, Sean. And it might sound weird at first, but I'll keep saying your name so that it can stick in my head.
Well, I did a presentation recently with somebody and their name was Adewome. How beautiful that name, Adewome. But it took me a minute to get there. You know what I'm saying? So I wrote it down and I had it phonetically spelled out, and eventually I learned it. It's such a beautiful name. You know what I mean? I did another presentation and this guy's name was Bode, but they called him Buddy, right?
No.
B-O-D-E, and the E had like an accent.
Yeah.
Bode, but they called him Buddy. You know what I'm saying? So these little, it's little things. I work with a woman whose name is Pune, okay, but they call her Pony.
Wow.
Okay. And for the longest while, she wasn't correcting anybody. So one day I said to her, how do you pronounce your name? Because it's like P''O''N'. And she said, it's like Pune, right? Pune. And she was like, thank you for asking. She was like, you're the first person to ask me. You know what I mean? So it's those small things that can make a difference.
And now with technology, Sean, there are so many platforms that we can use in our workplaces. Yes. There's one called Name Coach. There's a bunch of other ones that we can use that you can actually put a sound clip of the pronunciation of your name in your signature in your email.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
So there's lots of things. So there's no excuse for our workplaces to not empower us to be able to respect each other's names.
So full disclosure, I did want an abbreviated name of my name, Sean, growing up. You know what the abbreviated version of my name is? Shh.
Stop.
My wife's to this day. Shh. Hey. Shh. Right? It's offensive. That's my wife. I'm going to take it up with her later. Anyway, so Camille, there are lots of people here that are in the call today, and they want to know, they themselves have experienced microaggressions, and they want to know what are some of the ways that they can cope with them when this happens. So give us some coping mechanisms, some strategies, some guides.
Yeah, so collective coping, that looks like looking for connection and support from family and friends, community, professional networks. This could be anything from like joking about microaggressions like you and I do with your friends or loved ones, or it could be a formal mentoring program like the mentor that you had that helped you, right? Or joining an identity-based employee resource group, an ERG at work, right? So if your workplace does not have ERGs or affinity groups, it might be something important to look at. This strategy often involves microaffirmations, which is essentially the opposite of microaggressions, where people of color, we consciously affirm each other's values, integrity, and I feel like Black folks have that baked into our culture. Like, when I see, I'll be like, I see you, Sean. I see you. Like we have been through so much collectively that I think that we often try to affirm each other even when we don't need to, but that's kind of baked into our culture. A second coping strategy is referred to as resistance coping. That involves combating microaggressions by openly resisting Eurocentric norms, defying stereotypes, and also confronting people who commit microaggressions directly. This could involve, straying from stereotypes of appearance, like, for example, when Black women leave their hair natural or cut their hair off. Like, I remember when I went natural and I stopped relaxing my hair, putting harmful chemicals in my hair, stopped putting expensive fake hair. My mom was like, why? Wow. You're just making things more difficult for yourself. My mom was like, it looks better when it's straight. Like, I just feel like you're making your career, you're just making it more difficult.
Wow.
And so when you see a Black woman with natural hair or with short hair, it is really an act of resistance. And it is not an easy thing to do. A third coping strategy is self-protective coping, self-care. And that involves using self-care to protect yourself against microaggressions. And that honestly could look like just not having the conversation. So if, for white folks on the line, if you're thinking back and thinking about times in the office when you all have been, feeling good about talking about like a racial issue, and you're wondering, why isn't Stacey joining us?
Yes.
Like, she's Black. Like, doesn't she want to see like what good allies we're being? Like, doesn't she want to? She's tired. And she is practicing self-care by not engaging in that conversation.
So right? I went through this recently. So at work we have it's an employee resource group. It's a closed group for any employee who identifies as Black, and we called it a collective care group, which is a very nice term. But I found that in the midst of what was happening with the George Floyd and the weight what people were bringing, for my own mental health, I kind of had to pull back just a little bit, not abandon it completely, but I had to step out because between quarantine and the family and everything. And speaking of the George Floyd video, I can tell you that to this day, I had never seen that video from top to bottom. I've seen clips. Yeah. It became too much for me. As I'm eating dinner, it's on the TV. When I'm going to bed, it's on TV. And we think about the trauma that we carry with us every time we see this. And I see this man calling out for his mother. You know what I mean? It just became, and that's compounded on top of the Philando Castile and the Freddie Gray and all these other things that were. And so sometimes we forget that people are expected from the community to go into work and just function like normal, or maybe even attend that ERG group. And then here comes Black History Month, right? You got to be, you're Black, you can do this. You know what I mean? I might not have the bandwidth to do this at this time.
Yeah, emotionally.
Right? Yeah. So I think that's something that, especially as a male, it took, I really had to check myself and, because I'm trying to be big and strong and, but no, I needed that break, you know what I mean? So I could admit that. So yes, I love that you pointed that out. Okay. This is a big one. Okay. We talk about allyship.
Yeah.
And so I think that, there are many people here listening to it because they want to know how they can do better.
Yeah.
And what are some ways that they can intervene when they hear or observe these types of microaggressions happening in the workplace or in the community.
Yeah. So I like to call these some workplace friendly interventions because, the rules are a little different in and outside of work. You want to, approach something, but you don't want to blow up your whole job. Right. So you can say things like, hey, first you can actually just try repeating back what the person said very slowly. And that I can often help jolt them into the realization that it was not appropriate. Or you can say, you know what, I'm wondering what led you to believe that? Or what do you mean by that? Like, why does their race matter? Why does their gender matter? Like, did I miss something? Or you can say, hey, you know what? There's actually some history behind that word you just used. You may not know about it, but here's what I learned. Or you can say, hey, I noticed you said ... You can share your own journey. You can say, you know what? I used to say the same thing, but then I learned that this is what it means. Or you may not realize this. You might be surprised to hear this. Or if you're like me and, I talk with my entire body. And so when I give a non-verbal look of disapproval, you know what I'm thinking. You know what I mean. Sean has been on the opposite side of that look a lot. So he knows. Okay. So I want you to be true to yourself, though. If you're not the type of person who addresses things in the moment, if you're not the type of person, who is comfortable kind of like putting an awkward moment in a room, because it is an awkward moment. Yes. I'll say things like, somebody will say something offensive and they don't realize it's offensive. And I'll say, don't be that person.
Yeah.
And then everyone gets quiet and then they reflect a little bit and they're like, oh, yeah. And it's uncomfortable for a minute, and then we move on, right? But that's me and my personality, right? But if you want to speak to the person afterwards, pull them aside, be true to yourself.
I like the second one from the bottom when I noticed that you said something. I used to say that too, but then I learned I like that because it shows that level of empathy, and it shows that, you know, a bit of humility. Like I used to do that too. And it's not me putting myself on a level where I'm kind of pontificating down to the person.
Right.
I'm just letting them know that I'm guilty of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We can meet them where they're at and we can move forward. Okay.
Absolutely.
So next one is a big one too. All right. So what if I'm the one who says the wrong thing? You kind of we're alluding to that a little bit, right?
Yes, and inevitably it will happen. We have all found ourselves in a situation where we said something unknowingly offensive. Yeah. I want to share this analogy with you called Boots and Sandals that was created by an American software engineer, actually. And I think it's really useful for helping us to understand how to deal with microaggressions. So you can go to the next slide. And so we're asked to imagine that we are wearing a heavy boot. And wearing that boot prevents you from feeling when you've stepped on the toe of someone who's wearing sandals. If they say, "Oh, you're stepping on my toes," how do you react? I know it seems like a strange analogy, but it's very useful because when you step on someone's toe, you know exactly what to do. So we can use this to help us learn. So you stepped on someone's toe. Here is what not to do. This is what an egocentric response looks like. Centering yourself. "Oh, I can't believe you think I'm a toe stepper. I'm a good person."
Denial that others' experiences are different from your own. I don't mind when people step on my toes.
Or you derail. "Well, some people don't even have toes, so why aren't we talking about them instead?"
Right. Refusal to censor the impacted. All toes matter.
Sound familiar? Tone policing. "Well, I'd move my foot if you just asked me more nicely."
Denial that the problem is fixable. Toes getting stepped on is a fact of life. You'll be better off when you accept that.
Or you blame the victim. "Well, you shouldn't have been walking around people with boots."
Withdrawing. I thought you wanted my help, but I guess not. I'll just go home. Yeah.
Okay. This is what an ally's response looks like. You would be egoless. You would center the impacted person. "Are you okay?"
Right. You listen to their responses and learn. Thanks for letting me know.
You apologize for the impact, even though you didn't intend it. You just say, "I'm sorry."
Simple. Sometimes just saying I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But that's real hard for some people.
I know.
Right? Like my dad and my mom. Anyway, and my wife. Stop the instance, all right? Move your foot.
And stop the pattern. Be careful where you step in the future. So the "thanks for letting me know" and "I'm sorry" I will share with you is my default response when I've offended someone and I didn't realize it and I don't understand why what I've said is offensive. Yes. I apologize anyway and I say, "Thank you for letting me know that." And then I'll go off and do some research with the Google and figure out why is what I said offensive. I won't put the burden of my education on that person. And I won't say to them, "Well, I said that to my other Asian friend and they weren't offended. What's the problem?" I won't force them into telling me why that thing is offensive. Right. Based on the relationship I have, after I've done some research, I will come back and say, "Hey, you know what? I did a little bit of reading about what I said the other day and I think I understand a bit better. Can we talk about it?"
Like it.
Right? Instead of putting that on them.
Yes. Your analogy of was it the boots and sandals one? It brought back a bad memory. One time I kind of stepped on someone's foot in the elevator, but I didn't know I stepped on their foot. See, I was on a hoverboard and I thought it'd be a good idea to take my hoverboard into the elevator.
Yeah. That's
and
probably never
I was, but I couldn't tell that I was on this woman's foot and she was just looking straight ahead and all I heard was this. Now looking back, right, I probably should have gotten off and said, "Are you okay?" But I wasn't sure. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that story other than don't ride hoverboards in the elevator and
that's the takeaway.
Glide on people's foot.
So I wanted to leave you all with this resource.
Yes,
it's called the micropedia.org. It's an amazing resource. Bookmark it. It has, and I think you can also contribute to it, just like Wikipedia. So they have basically over the last year been collecting different categories of microaggressions for people to be more aware of them. The more aware we are, the more we know not to say these these certain things. And then, of course, we want to thank you for being here and let you know all of this information and more, of course, is included in the Inclusive Communications Micro-Credential course that is offered through Dalhousie University by myself. And Sean is one of the facilitators who will be doing our live sessions. Thank you.
There you go. A little applause right there.
So you'll see more of Sean, more of me, and more of other facilitators that I've gathered, best in class, of several different identities.
Yes.
I have a non-binary person, 2 Indigenous women, other Black women, a white male. We want to give you access to all of our lived experience because we all bring something different to the table. So we hope you'll click the link that's available and check out the course, and you can sign up at any time because it's all online. Okay, we know you have lots of questions, so we want to get to them.
I'm going to stop sharing now. We'll go back here.
Perfect. And maybe we can bring this over there.
Yes, let's bring it over. Here we go.
Hi, Mary Eleanor.
Awesome. Hi. Thank you so much. Yes. Lots of applause and great conversation. One person suggesting that the two of you could form a podcast.
I know.
You never know. You never know.
I'm
writing that resource in the chat.
Awesome. All right. So we have about 15 minutes for some questions. Again, if you want to add them in the chat or just raise your hand in the chat and I'm happy to unmute you. That would be best option. So let me just pause.
Don't mind me if I'm leaning forward. I'm not wearing my glass. I'm showing my age now. I've got my glasses. Can't we make this font bigger, Camille? What's up with that?
Should we go like this?
Anyway. Whoa, no, Camille, what are you doing? That's okay. I can see. Daisy Wright, thank you. She says you really enjoyed it. If you scroll down a bit, Daisy, thank you.
And May just had a question, and I'm really glad they asked it. So, will we receive the recording or PowerPoint? So, the recording, what we like to do after each of our webinars is we distill the recording, make sure you get all of the great nuggets, and then we host it on our YouTube channel, on our faculty's YouTube channel. So we send this out before the end of the workday. So check your inboxes, check your junk and your spam as a precaution. And that will have a link to our channel on YouTube where you can rewatch this, share it with your colleagues. And it will also have a link to the course that Camille mentioned earlier that just launched just over a month ago, I think it was, Camille. Yeah.
So Margaret has a really great comment. And Margaret, I like that you raised this. She's saying that, do your own research. That comment is, fair if you're someone who is of a racialized or marginalized community. But if you are someone who holds a lot of privilege and let's say another privileged person asks you about it, it would be good for you to share your own knowledge with them, because that's really what allies are called to step up and do. When you learn something, everything you've learned here, my hope is that you take it to your dinner table. Right. You take it to, Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving dinner with, Uncle Jack keeps saying these offensive things and no one's calling him on it. Right. You are educated now, and you can say, Uncle Jack, we don't say that anymore. And I can tell you, I have to have those conversations with my own mother. It's not, and when we talk about colonization, white supremacy, etc., it's not only white folks who embody this. Yeah. All of us have been raised in this, especially growing up in the Caribbean, colonization. A lot of our parents and grandparents' generation hold a lot of internalized racism
and don't even know it. And no clue,
not at all. They would tell you, no, I'm Black. You can't call me, you can't say that. I know, but there are a lot of biases, shadism, colorism that plagues our community, right? Yes. So we each need to look at each of our own corners of the world and see, what change we can make in our own backyards first.
Yes, that's right.
Camille, can I jump in just with a quick question? Because I love the format of the webinar that you both hosted is really focused on things that you can do and think about today, right now. And how does that get reflected in like the course itself and how you've structured it? I'm just wondering if maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, in the course, I love that we have included interactive questions. So there's no like quizzes and tests and that type of thing. But before you move on to each next module, there's an interactive scenario that you have to go through. So it gives you a scenario saying, you know, Sean and Camille were in a meeting and Mary Eleanor came in and Sean said this. If you were Camille, how would you respond? Or how would you show up in allyship for Mary Eleanor, etc.? And it gives you some choices. And each choice that you click, it brings up some more education. It'll tell you, okay, good start, but here's why this is not impactful, or here's why this would not be effective. So it really is you're learning as you're going along at every single point in the course, which I love.
Awesome.
And then obviously, Marilyn, there's lots of takeaways. So there's lots of downloadables in the course. You can print out that entire sheet that we went through of the microaggressions, put it up at your desk, or the boots and sandals analogy. That's something people love to print out as well and share with their other colleagues. So there's so many resources that you can go away with from the course.
Awesome. And one thing that really excites me and perhaps will get other people pretty jazzed is that people can participate in Q&A sessions with you live.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of built into the course too. So it's a great opportunity, I think, to maybe reflect on the scenarios that you just mentioned, but then also maybe bring some examples to their own,
So there are 8 modules in the course, and after every 2 modules, we hold a live Q&A. And then Sean might be my co-facilitator, or somebody else from my team might be my co-facilitator. So you'll get different perspectives every time you log on.
Awesome. There's a question here from Olivia. Tips for what to do if you try to explain and then undermine or say, and they undermine, or say you're being dramatic.
Yeah, that often happens. And so I would tell you to gauge your own emotional equilibrium at that time and decide for yourself how much of your emotional energy you want to invest in this conversation. So it really is hard to answer definitively, because it's based on if that person is a close friend, or are they someone you have to keep working with over and over? Are they someone who is a boss to you? Then maybe you have to take it a little bit further. You have to, report it, etc., or you have to keep sending reminders to that person. So really that's a very personal choice. But I would say to let them try to maybe find an analogy. We've used lots of analogies today, but I find using analogies, like I'll give you one example. I had a gentleman say to me in one of my sessions, you can't say anything anymore. You just can't say anything. And I said, what industry do you work in? And he works in a seniors residence where they do, personal care, etc. I said, tell me about some of the language that you all use that's specific to that industry. And he said, okay, well, for example, we don't call people PSWs. We call them resident care providers, RCPs. And he told me a few more things. I said, I'm sure there's a lot more. And if I were to write all those things down, one could say, man, that's a lot to remember. I'm never going to remember all of this. Man, I don't know if I can say anything without getting in trouble at this workplace. I said, it's the same thing with language in your day-to-day experience with people. Every single workplace, no matter what industry, has their own lexicon, their own specific phrases that they use. And the reason they have that is because they know how impactful language is. They know how using the wrong term can change a mood in a meeting, can affect someone's self-esteem or how they see themselves. And so it is the same thing with respecting people's pronouns, with how they want to be seen or addressed, right? So, it's not that it's too much or we're never going to remember. Also, this work is not about memorizing things.
Right.
You will never remember everything. Plus, we are learning about more intersections of identity every day. And it's about thinking to yourself, how can I respond when I do say the wrong thing or when I do make a mistake? Can I respond with empathy? Can I drop my ego? When someone has taken the time to let me know I have said something offensive? That's where I want you to get in your allyship journey.
Larry just made a really important comment in the chat just a little bit earlier as you were speaking, Camille. I just want to raise it here. So Larry said, as a person of age, I frequently misgender people. It's very difficult to unlearn.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and unlearning perhaps is an element of that, or evolving in your learning.
It's not just you though, Larry, because like as I said, I spent a lot of years in the entertainment industry, hip hop community more specifically. And so we have this thing where we see people and say, what's up, guys? What's going on? Right. And so I did a talk recently where I had to let them know, like, meet me halfway. I mean, I'm going to make mistakes. Sometimes I say, hey, what's up, guys? And I don't mean it. It's just the community in which I came from. And we forget that the hip hop is in itself is a culture, and it's a culture, and it's a way that I would use to relate to that specific demographic in my workplace. Right. And so sometimes these things do come out, and but I try my best to be mindful, and when I catch it, I'm able to adjust. So it's 2022, so there's a lot more ideas and pedagogies and theory. There's a lot of things going on right now. We need time to adjust, and let's not be too hard on ourselves either. But Larry, I like the fact that you're owning that and being transparent about the fact that's can be a difficulty for you at times. It's a difficulty for me too, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, my best friend in the world, who also happens to be a racial equity educator, their name is Tennille, and they'll be one of the facilitators as well. Tennille recently, within the last year, came out as non-binary, and my kids know them as Auntie Tennille, and we've gone like almost a decade, calling them she. And so there's still times now when I call them the wrong pronoun, or when I'll be like, "Girl, guess what?" and I'll be like, "Oh, no, don't say that." And so it's a adjustment for all of us, but it doesn't mean because we make a mistake that we'll stop trying or that we shut down. That is getting it wrong. Shutting down and letting that be your barrier to not respecting someone's pronouns or identity, that is the worst thing we can do. Keep trying.
A question from Natalie, and then we have two hands raised, so I want to make sure that we get to them. So Natalie says or asks, can you speak more about the emotional attacks of microcredentials? Microaggressions, sorry.
Yeah.
Who's paying the tax and who's collecting it? How can it be addressed or alleviated?
Yeah. Marginalized folks are paying that tax. And when you say who's collecting it, what comes to mind is who's benefiting from that. And, systems that oppress other people are benefiting from it because it keeps you from being your greatest self. It keeps your eye off the prize. It keeps you distracted. It keeps you second guessing yourself. Do I belong here? Am I good enough? Was that feedback really about my work, or was it about my gender? It keeps you questioning, keeps you up at night, all of these things. So in terms of how it can be mitigated, we have to get open and honest. We have to normalize talking about identity. We have to, in a workplace, we can't wait for something to happen before we talk about what does it look like in this workplace for us to inclusively communicate. What does inclusion look like in this specific workplace? What are our boundaries in this specific workplace? What consequences do we have when one of us crosses the line? So it's not just about this education. It's about putting in actual policies that show people that, there is room for us to make mistakes and grow. But if one of us is refusing to admit that we've made those mistakes and refusing to grow, then there must be a consequence for that.
Right.
Okay, let me unmute. We have a few more questions. We have 3 minutes left, so let's see just how much we can get done. So I'm going to unmute a person here. So yeah.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks. This has been great. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
So I want to ask about a scenario that's like, if there's like political sensitivity going on in the world. Example, let me just explain it. So I had COVID a few weeks ago. I didn't shave my beard for a while or trim it, so it got really long. I get back to the office and somebody says I look like a terrorist. Right? And it's not lost on me that they have, and not against this or anything, but like very pro-Ukrainian flags everywhere around their desk. But so there's the one thing of saying, calling me a terrorist is definitely wrong, but there's a broader, the narrative that's being portrayed of like, refugees from one part of the world as opposed to like, say, from Afghanistan or Yemen or Syria, that it's really illuminated, that racism that's going on. So like, how do you take it from that, one factor of, you shouldn't be calling me terrorist, to this broader conversation of like, well, how we portraying, certain people from different parts of the world and how we humanize them.
Yeah, I like stats. I like facts. So if I was in that situation, I would say, and what does a terrorist look like? And they would have difficulty answering that, or they would say, oh, well, people from so-and-so. And then I'd say, well, do you know? And then I would pull out some stats. Now, it might be hard for you in that moment. You probably just don't have those at hand. But you know what? I'm also here for passive aggressive post addressing. So I would then find an article or do some research, and then I would just email them that with no subject line and just have them read that, right? Because all of these stereotypes are steeped in misinformation.
Right.
So I always like to come back with facts.
And how, I'm just curious to know, how did you respond in that immediate moment after the comment was made to you? Is this something that you kind of both, or were you shocked, or did you kind of laugh a lot to kind of lighten the situation, and you were stunned? Like, how did you react in that moment?
I was caught off guard, stunned. Like, it's somebody who, like, there's only a few of us who came to the office during the whole pandemic, like a handful, and they were one of them. And we have a great relationship. And I was just caught off guard, and my thoughts were like, what is this, 2010? Because that was a joke for like 10 years then.
Right.
And so I didn't really say anything. They did apologize afterwards, but I still don't think they fully comprehend like what they're doing when they're doing that. So
yeah, send along. I would send them some articles or research.
Yeah, and my only little 2 cents here would be, sometimes I look at the dynamics I have with that person, the working relationship I have with them relative to the culture of the actual workplace. Is this a person where we could just literally right then and there have that conversation? Doesn't need to be confrontational. But I can just say to them, did you really have to make that comment, man? This kind of makes you, do you have that relationship with that person? Does the culture allow for that? And so that's a very subjective thing. We don't know the dynamics between you and this other individual. But I find that for me, when I gave that example of, hey, Sean, this is only for employees who did the payroll deduction. Looking back, my real frustration was with my inability to have handled the situation better, because I didn't have the tools at the time to identify what I was experiencing and contextualize it. And I could have pulled that person aside and just had a off the cuff conversation. And
Ella is saying, you're right, Ella, sending education to the person who made the comment is emotional labor for the person offended, but it's a choice that we make in the moment. So if he felt like, I don't want to respond to this, that's totally fine. You don't have to always respond, right? You can leave that person. But it's going to keep me up at night if I didn't have a good comeback, if I didn't have a zinger, because I need to have the last word. Gotcha. So I would definitely send that FBI stat that somebody put in the, Derek, thank you. FBI says the #1 threat in North America is homegrown terrorists who have infiltrated police and military and corrections, right-wing militia. So that's me. But everyone, make your own choice based on your, is your emotional tank full, or is it empty? If it's empty, don't go out there feeling like you need to educate the whole world. We can't.
I know we're a few minutes over time, but I just, let's not end the conversation here.
Sure.
Thanks so much for the discussion. And I will also now take another hand here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Sean and Camille. Thank you so much. I'm joining you from Newfoundland and Labrador. To give you a little bit of context, I'm a person who works in the employment programming, and right now I'm preparing my team for a new program through which we are going to serve international students and temporary migrants. The part when you were talking about discrimination in the hiring processes really touched me because of my line of work, but at the same time, because as a person working in my undergrad, I saw many of my managers that received resumes separating resumes because they had weird names.
Yep.
Like they would call it.
Yeah.
Weird names. Yeah. So I guess that to be conscious of the time, I was wondering if you have any resources that you can mention resources to support people that are afraid of suffering discrimination in the hiring process because of their names would
Yeah.
be very helpful, because my team is mostly conformed by white co-workers, and
Yep.
we have had discussions about disclosing. And we touched the sort of like topic of like some of our participants changing their names.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of opinions about that, and a lot of ways of going about supporting people. But I want to be very aware of anti-racism lenses, because I want to prepare well for the participants that I will be intaking. So any resources you can send or any experiences or a piece of advice would be very helpful.
Yeah,
And
so
for your
I don't
knowledge.
have any resources off the top of my head. But what I can say to you is that, one, support the candidate if they so choose to shorten or change their name. So do not say, oh no, you shouldn't do that. Because there are many, the reality is marginalized people have to find ways to subvert the system. And that is one of those ways. However, your focus shouldn't be on those candidates. It should be on the people who are receiving those candidates. And it should be on showing them studies that show, because I'm sure those people will say to you, no, we're not biased. We're a great group of guys. We want diversity in our workplace. We want the best candidate for the job. And I want you to challenge them on that. And I don't know if you have the resources to do like mini, like mock experiments or mock studies, right? To show them how their bias shows up. But the focus should be on those people who are making those decisions and showing them how these stereotypes is bad for their bottom line. It's bad for business.
Yes.
Because show them what they're missing out on. Show them the resumes of people who have so much experience and so much to bring to the table that they're missing out on just because they're stereotyping them on their name.
And that's a classic example of systemic racism,
Yeah.
right? I mean, when we can't pronounce your name,
Yep. out the
disregard
door.
the resume, out the door next, right? And I think I would encourage you actually, Nadia, to look online at some of the there are plenty of documents out there. The top 10 benefits to having a diverse workplace, and it touches on everything from innovation to problem solving. And once we can begin to really embrace and understand some of these things, it really will help you along in educating other people as well.
Yeah, in the
process.
course, there's an entire section on hiring. I do, thank you, Daisy. I do talk about blind hiring, but we have to go beyond blind hiring, because if we're saying, okay, we're just going to take off the names and then we go, but there are other social and cultural identifiers in a resume that can lead to bias. Suppose I went to university in Mumbai, but you took my name off the resume, but people see that I went to university in Mumbai. And they're like, yeah, they're not Canadian educated, so let's put that resume out, right? So we have to really get strict about how we are removing bias from our processes. The course has a huge section on hiring processes.
Thank you very much for your insight today. I would definitely like more information about the course. Thanks.
Yes.
Wonderful. And that's a fantastic segue. Thanks so much, Nadia, for your question, for the discussion. And I've been getting a lot of questions in the chat. Some folks were only able to join halfway through or missed it because of time zone.
I realize some people missed up the time zones. No worries.
So not to worry, we've recorded the webinar, and we will have it posted on our YouTube channel. We will be sending an email to everyone who attended and also those who registered who weren't able to attend. So you'll have those in your inbox before the end of the workday. Check your junk and spam folders if you don't see it there in your inbox. And just a tremendous thank you to you, Camille and Sean, for walking us through today's webinar. Very informative, lots to think about, and so much love being sent over to both of you in the chat. So much appreciated. I hope that many of you will explore the course and at the very least, continue conversations that were initiated today. So thanks so much, and take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you for
again.
having us.
Take care.
Bye.
Cue the applause. There we go. There's the applause.
Take care.
Thanks again.